Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to Talk in Town. It's another hot one here in Chelmsford. Not sure what it's like where you are, but it's another warm one here. Great to have you with us. As we predicted, there would be another Talk in Town this week, a transfer show. We did think it was going to be Sammy Smodics, right? But it's not. It's going to be Conor Townsend. So we're going to be talking about him in a minute. I have got Richard Chandler will be joining me. Gov is producing from behind the scenes out in Lanzarote still. He flies back this weekend and we will be back to normal. He'll be back in the hot seat. You'll be pleased to hear. We'll have to put up with my witterings. But huge news coming out of Pullman Road this week, of course. We've had Sam Morsey. We've got, with his new contract, we've got Mark Hudson has joined as set piece coach and first team coach coming into Pullman Road as well. We've had two people retiring. Mike O'Leary, that was a shock. We're going into the Premier League campaign with without Mike O'Leary. So we've got that one as well. We've got Pat Godbold, described as by Mark Ashton today as Ipswich royalty. She's retired as well after 70 years. We're going to get into all that kind of chat and more this evening. Martin, are you going to bring Rich in for me? Because he's not on screen right now. Oh, there you go. He's going to give you a big old intro. How you doing?
I'm good, you?
I'm all right, thanks. I can't find any balance in this country. I'm either too hot or too cold. Do you find this?
Yeah, I'm from where I work upstairs in my house, and it's like some kind of sauna. It's horrific, or it's freezing cold. There's no balance.
I would wager it's hotter in the UK right now than where Martin is in Lanzarote. But there we go.
Yeah,
good to see you, Rich. Anyway, long time no see. The last time I saw you, we were both staggering around outside the Curve Bar after getting promoted. I'm pleased to hear you got back to Colchester, all right, 3 months later.
I did, yeah. I got back to Colchester and contemplated going out again, which wouldn't have been sensible given that I'd been out all day. But yeah, it was a hell of a day.
I could barely talk the next day if you watched the show.
My voice was gone.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got stuff to talk about. Before we get into transfers, like we say, me and Tux did the show Sunday. We were pondering whether or not we'd be revealing Sammy Smodics. We're not. It's going to be Conor Townsend, but we'll get to that in a bit. But let's start with our captain, Sam Morsey. He's extended his contract, Rich, till May 2026. Now, we obviously call you affectionately Crystal Ball. You knew this was happening. You got, I mean, like, all Ipswich fans are going to be delighted, right? I've even contemplated, right? I've got the old orange shirt on tonight, right? I've even contemplated getting Morsey 5 on my shirt for this coming season. I mean, that's how much this guy means to town fans, right?
Absolutely. And that's not last season's, the seasons before shirt. And that's the first time I've had a name on the back of my shirt since Holland.
Really? Oh, yeah. Well, good company, right?
And now I have all of my newer shirts have different players' names on because I think it's quite nice to respect them. But he, for me, is the standout, probably the standout signing of all of them. And we've had some pretty blooming good signings in the 3 years under the new owners. But you've got him that just seems to get levels above every season, above what he was the previous season. I can't remember the last time he didn't get probably a 7 or an 8.
Agreed. You could probably count on 3 fingers in the 3 seasons he's done, the bad games he's had. Maybe not even that many. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where does he rank for you as like great town captains? I mean, look, he is, you know, with McKenna in the dugout, he has been the leader on the pitch of back-to-back promotions. Unbelievable piece of history for us.
Modern era, I think you go back to Holland, and I think we'll see what he does in the Premier League. I've seen some comments this week on the Discord and in some other areas that they think people saying that he's going to get destroyed in the Premier League. I just don't see it. I think he's far too clever a footballer for that to be the case. I think he'll pick up a lot of yellow cards, but I think that's part of his game.
Yeah. It's interesting now. I mean, that is a good point. I mean, to go from like League One to Premier League in 2 seasons is pretty much unheard of. I mean, not many clubs have done it. And I suppose he's kind of an old school kind of midfielder, isn't he? He's that kind of enforcer that we used to cry out for when he wasn't here. I mean, the reason he come in when it was when kind of Lee Evans was handed the the captain role under Paul Cook, and it seemed apparent we were missing a bit of bite in midfield. And in comes Morsey, and then there's no looking back. But I suppose he is a different type of midfielder than supposing what you would see in the Premier League from the kind of the established clubs, I guess.
I think he's a different kind of midfielder. I think he's a bit old school, but I also think he's got a lot more skill than people give him credit for. I think there's a couple of things there. Cook said after the Bolton defeat, when Morsey was signed on a red card suspension, that we lose like that under him. Arguably, the only time we've lost under him since where we've played badly was Leeds away and West Brom away. The rest of them, I can't remember another time when we've played badly and we've lost.
Yeah, good point.
We get ripped apart by West Brom in the way that Bolton did that 5-2 game, but which was a disaster. But when you watch him, he turns and he holds players off when he's not necessarily the biggest guy on the field, but he then has the skill to be able to pick a pass. There's been several games where he's looked up and put a diag across to Davis, who's then whipped it in loads of times, and same the other side to Morsey, to Burns.
Yeah. I think when he signed, we did like because he signed right on the transfer deadline, didn't he? I remember we did like a deadline day show or whatever. And I think when he did actually put pen to paper, it did feel like that a kind of Matt Holland, DeVos style leader was coming back into the frame for us a little bit. And, everyone liked Chambers, didn't they? Well, I think they did. I mean, look, he was a great servant for us, and he was blood, guts and sweated tears for us. But he kind of marshaled us in a bad era for the club, really. And I don't know, it just felt like another door was opening, and you coincide that, as you rightly say, with the game-changing money coming in, and suddenly, all the stars aligned for him, didn't they?
Yeah, totally. And I think people like Warnock saying how good a player he was and he didn't want to lose him tells you what you needed to know. And that was exactly, when he was at Middlesbrough coming down to us. He didn't want to sell him, and he came down to there's a lot of players that we've got to be thankful that we've got because of Paul Cook, because he's one of 5 or 6 that only signed because Paul Cook was there.
Yeah, absolutely. People should not forget that Cook brought in the majority of players that have been very pivotal for us, I think. Your Christian Waltons, your Sam Morseys, your Conor Chaplins, Wes Burns, all that kind of good stuff. So the captain signs on anyway. So that's brilliant. We've got him for another couple of years, which is fantastic. One that's gone under the radar, I think, a little bit, Rich, with Town fans is Mark Hudson coming in as set-piece first-team coach. So he's 42 years age, 424 career appearances, over 100 at Crystal Palace, Cardiff and Huddersfield. I think it's, when people join a backroom staff, they're not the biggest of names. I think it's very easy to kind of gloss over the kind of influence they might have. I mean, he's done 18 games as Cardiff manager. Didn't particularly turn out that great for him between September and January 23. So he was only there for 6 months. But quite pivotal, when we talk about signings that come in and what McKenna's looking for, what Ashton's looking for, is that kind of pedigree of personality, isn't it? It's quite interesting to read in the Huddersfield Examiner when Hudson got given a new contract at Huddersfield. They said what Hudson brings to the table is a sense of leadership, responsibility, an ability to spark respect and admiration in others, a desire to help and improve younger members of the side. I think he's pretty much ticking all the boxes you need to be a part of this Ipswich Town setup, don't you think?
I do. I think it's another key signing. I mean, I've named my bit on here A+ transfer window, and I include him in that because I think what we get off the field as well as what we get on it are key signings and can be very important. And another one that's kind of gone under the radar is Martin being brought in as now going to be registered as the third choice goalie.
Oh yeah, David Martin.
Because you don't need to have a player that's going to play loads of games.
Yeah,
you need someone who can be there as a support and assistant, and not take up a load of funds in transfer or anything else, but bring a lot of experience, which he does. And Hudson brings a lot of experience.
I think when people think of like set piece coaches, you're thinking like as they'd say in American football, offense. But there's the defensive side of that as well, I think, is key. And I think the fact he's a defender, centre half, being a captain, etc. I mean, you're looking at attack and defending, aren't you, in that kind of role, I suppose?
Yeah, you are. And when you do coaching badges, you're taught all of that. it's defending or attacking when outnumbered, or vice versa. It's
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff that he'll be working on, and we're going to have an awful lot of times where we're defending in numbers this season by nature of it, because we're probably going to be at our most dangerous on the break.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck to him. It's good. Another addition to the coaching staff as we transition into the Premier League. 2 people leaving the club. Mike O'Leary, of course, chair. That was a bit of a shock to me, Rich. I mean, I know you know the Game Changer guy as well. We've obviously had him on the show previously, but Mike came in. He was the chairman over the Game Changer era, 3.5 years in post. He said that getting to the Premier League was a dream. He leaves, mission accomplished. I will miss his box filing expertise. I mean, when they done those kind of like Zoom calls with him, that was just unbelievable to me. I will miss that greatly. The colour coordination of the shelving behind him was just fantastic.
I wonder if he knew what was in any of half of it. I just can't.
yeah. Get on a cloud is my advice. Yeah. So I mean, look, I mean, I'd like to call him a bit of a legend, really. I mean, he was part of the Arizona group that's come in and has gone from League One to Premier League. I think anyone connected to that, the speed of where we've transitioned from in the Football League to Premier League, I think you're always going to have a little place in our history. And now Mark Ashton is taking on a dual role, which is a bit unusual, I think, a CEO and a chair. I mean, CEO is the day-to-day running of a business generally, and a chair is kind of like liaising with a board of directors, I guess. So he's going to do both. Maybe that will change over the 12 months, but bit of a shout out for Mike O'Leary from you, Rich.
Yeah, I think he's been pivotal, but I think he's also a bit understated, isn't he? I think that I don't know, but I think that O'Leary came in to get us to the Premier League, knowing his age, and the moment that we got there, he was going to retire, because he's already said in his statement, hasn't he, that he's been travelling up to games, and he's been working a couple of days a week and then going to every home and away game, from what I can work out. That's a mission. That's tiring, and he's done a hell of a job. But I think also, I suspect that Luke Werhan has been given more and more responsibility and been brought through, and clearly is very valued by Mark Ashton. And he's his right-hand man. So I'd imagine that allows time for Mark Ashton in the 5 hours that he's not sleeping a night to do that as part of his 85-hour week or whatever he does.
But he's not on the
tools.
tools.
To always be working.
Yeah, but he's not on the tools in the tunnel. Getting that ready. Yeah, I think certainly Luke Warren, it seems like that he may fill that CEO role. Look, I've got no proof of this. I'm just like looking at the situation, and maybe Mark Ashton will continue as the chair. We'll see how it pans out, but brilliant regardless. And of course, a true legend of the club, Rich. I've met her one time. I'm pretty certain you probably have when you've been behind the scenes at Bournemouth Road. It's Pat Godbold, of course. 70-year servant at Ipswich Town. She is now 89. Described, as I said earlier, but described today by Mark Ashton at her retiring party as Ipswich Town royalty. She started work at Ipswich Town as secretary to Scott Duncan in 1954. She carried that role right through into the late 90s with George Burley. She was there, obviously, with the pivotal years of Bobby Robson. I think she worked with him at the club and outside with his other business interests as well. So I think nearly 40 years she was working with Bobby. She affectionately called him Mr. R, which I've always really liked. She had the retirement party today. Terry Butcher was there, Russell Osborne was there, Walkie, Chris Kiwomia, Adam Tanner, James Scowcroft, Osborne, Paul Goddard, Jason Zell, Cole Skews, David Sheepshanks. There was flowers, there was cake, there was speeches. I mean, can this woman not bring a book out? I mean, phenomenal stories, right, Rich? I mean, if you could just tap into Pat's brain for the life experience. I mean, she's led a life that us as Ipswich Town, blue and white DNA in us. I mean, what a life she's had, what a career she's had. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. And whenever you hear her speak, whether it's publicly, which hasn't been loads, but you would think there's got to be a book there, because the stories she must have from back all over the time, different eras of different managers. But amazing. It's just phenomenal. I've, as you know, been going since I was like 8, 9, and I'm 52. She was always there, always, and doesn't. When you're young, obviously everyone that's older than you seems old, but she doesn't seem like she's that much older, considering that I now feel like I'm ancient. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, mate. I'm in the same boat. Yeah, the time I met her, I was doing a little bit on BBC Suffolk when I was at the FA with Mark Murphy, and she was, I think we were playing Burton, and I predicted like a 4-5-0 overly optimistic scoreline, and she was like 0-0. I think Burton were like bottom. It was when Darren Bent was there. And I was like, I can't see a 0-0. I can't see that happening. And lo and behold, it was 0-0. What the bloody hell do I know? So, I mean, I bow down to the expertise. That is Pat Godbold. Yeah, fantastic. Happy retirement, Pat. What a servant to the club. Brilliant. Well, if you are long-term viewers of Talking Town, you will know that we are now in the market ourselves for new signings. We are about to present our first new signing of the summer here on Talking Town. And Rich, you know, when you look back at what sport the success at Ipswich in previous seasons and over the last couple of seasons, it's that connection to West Bromwich Albion, isn't it? Be it Bobby Robson, is it Mike O'Leary, it's Mark Ashton. So we've done exactly the same thing. We've gone to West Bromwich Albion. We've looked for somebody with Premier League experience. So someone who's going to be a pretty semi-regular on Talking Town over the next 12 months as we go into the Premier League is the most opinionated man in football. It's Chris Hall, everybody.
Hello, mate. How are you doing?
How are you doing? All right?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. As good as anybody is on an overly hot Thursday evening.
Yeah. I was going to announce you as the world's most opinionated man in football, but I don't know. I mean, that's potentially true. I was going to also introduce you as the world's most annoying man, but actually, I think that's your nickname for me, isn't it?
Well, it's one of them. I mean, but I've got to be honest. I don't want you to have to put too many filters on this, so I'm not gonna reel off many of the others. It ends up a bit like that outtake from Afterlife. You know the bit with Ratty where he introduces his mate. If we start going through all your nicknames,
God, yeah, I think we'll get censored if we start doing that. Right? Yeah,
we really will. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of our contributors, Mark Tuxford, who was on with us Sunday, he got married today. And Chris, you've got a wedding just around the corner. I know this because I'm coming to it. So, I mean, we're looking
2
forward
weeks
to
today,
that.
mate. 2 weeks today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to that one. Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. And thanks for committing to our Premier League campaign and joining Talking Town. Like I say, I think we're going to probably see you maybe like once a month, every 6 weeks, something like that. I'm sure you will give a balanced, non-blue, tinted spectacles view of how we're doing in the Premier League. Hopefully it's not bottom of the table after the first 3 games, right? I mean, we do have a tough 2 games, mate, don't we? I mean, look, Liverpool, Man City don't come much tougher, do they?
Well, this is it, and yeah. Look, you know what it's like, mate. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, am I? As you said, most opinionated man in football. I'm very the moniker bestowed upon me by our wonderful colleague, former colleague Andy Walker. I can't tell it any other way, can I? So no, I'll call it like it is. That's but I mean we've just signed Devante Cole yesterday, so yeah. So if we get you in the cup, maybe you can bring back memories of your previous Premier League campaign and his dad scoring 5 goals against you. So
yeah, all right. This could be the shortest signing in history if we go down that route. Yeah, absolutely. Rich, well, I mean, look, we've not really discussed the fixtures, have we? I mean, we've been chatting on WhatsApp and stuff, but I mean, what are you expecting out of August? I mean, it's Liverpool, it's Man City away, and then it's Fulham, isn't it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think realistically, anyone thinking that we'll get massive points out of those first 3 games is kidding themselves. But what I would say, and this is trying to not be too blue tinted glasses about it all, is I would rather play them first 2 games. If you're going to play 2 of your 4 hardest games of the season, and I'd imagine Liverpool at home and Liverpool away and Man City at home and Man City away are probably most people's hardest 4 games of the season.
Yeah.
We've got 2 of them out of the way before we've even got out of August.
Yeah.
I saw some stat stuff the other day, and the average for a team coming up from their first 6 games is about 6 or 7 points. If we can get 6 points out of our first 6 games, we'll do all right.
Oh, bloody hell, yeah. Well, I think I would say that. Chris, are we kind of like, look, Ipswich fans, right? Look, we're coming on you've been listening to me for God knows how many years. We're coming off the back of back-to-back promotions, right? So we've got the momentum, we've got the excitement, there's adrenaline there. A lot of people think we're going to do all right in the Premier League. Are we, do you feel we're overexcited a little bit? I mean, is the Premier League a tough division? I mean, West Brom was in there for quite a while, wasn't it? Until you came back down again. I mean, you mingled in there for a while, didn't you?
Well, I mean, we were in there for a long while. I mean, look, first of all, by the way, Liverpool early on in the season, that has got the feeling of an absolute ding dong 4-3 to Liverpool written all over it. It reminds me a little bit of when Leeds came up and played them on like the opening day and it finished 4-3. I can see it being a similar sort of affair. Look, it's an incredibly tough league. The gap between the Championship and the Premier League is huge. You've only got to look at how the three teams that went up last season just absolutely got crushed. It was brutal. I mean, you've got Forest and Everton getting points deductions and still staying up comfortably. So I don't think I think you've got to go into it with your eyes open. It's not getting promoted from the Championship is not what it was 5 or 6 years ago. And I know people will point out that the year before last, the three teams that came up stayed up. Okay, but look at how much money Nottingham Forest spent to stay up by the skin of their teeth. Yeah, a couple of years before that, Aston Villa spent like 100 million to stay up, thanks to goal line technology failing to work properly.
Don't be bitter now. Your Midlands rivalries.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. That's how they stayed up, and and frankly, they should be relegated / liquidated for that. But take their Champions League place off them, and just send them down into the Dr. Martens if indeed that still exists. But that's not the Albion fan in me speaking.
No, of course not.
It's an incredibly tough division. That having been said, clubs like Brentford, who have showed that if you come up and you deal with the division in a sensible fashion with good players, you recruit well, you can and you've already recruited players that can have a go at this division, you can do well. Where I think McKenna, for me, has massively got to get it right is last season you were what Burnley were to the Championship the season before. Fun, open, fast, attacking football. If you come into the Premier League and you're as open as you were last year, you'll get destroyed, like Burnley did. McKenna has got to look at what happened to Burnley last season and go, I cannot do that week in, week out, which is why I find Conor Townsend such an interesting signing, because he is the antithesis of Leif Davis. He couldn't be further apart from what he is. And I can't help feeling that if you just wanted a backup to Leif Davis, you could have bought an attacking fullback. You could, for the money that you've spent on Conor Townsend, you could have probably gone and found an attacking fullback that you could have taken. He hasn't. He's taken an excellent one-on-one defender. He's taken a guy who is very good at staying at home, is good in the air, who's a solid player, unspectacular, good passer of the ball, but never going to fly forward with pace down the wing. And that makes me think that he's very mindful of the fact that there are going to be games when he cannot have Leif Davis just flying up and down that wing. And he's going to have to play a flat defence, and he's going to have to try and frustrate teams. And Leif Davis sits on the bench and is there for if you go a goal down and you need to get back into the game in the last 20 minutes. I think McKenna is a good coach. He's a top coach, and frankly, I think he's a far less idealistic coach than Vincent Kompany is, and I don't think he will approach this division in the same naive way that Kompany did.
Thoughts on that, Rich?
I think you're bang on. I think there'll be games, but I don't necessarily. One of the things I've been thinking about while people have been banging on that we need a left-sided player to replace Broadhead is if you've got Townsend, why can't you have Townsend playing with Leif as the left-sided winger? Because he's got more than good enough delivery. He's got more than good enough engine to be able to get back and help the defence out if he needs to. But as well as Townsend at a left back, I think Townsend's a really good signing. I think he's a really good signing.
I mean, what's his history with you then, Chris? I mean, like, you signed him from Scunthorpe, I think. What, about 2017, 18 or something?
It was. We signed him from Scunthorpe in the summer of 2018. I mean, he didn't impress at all early days. In fact, back end of the championship season when we won promotion, I was openly saying, because Kieran Gibbs did what Kieran Gibbs did and got injured,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and Conor Townsend had to play some of the back end of that season, and I was saying at that point, if we go into the Premier League season with Conor Townsend as our first choice left back, we're going to get absolutely destroyed. We go into the season, Kieran Gibbs gets himself sent off for an act of absolute idiocy at Everton, and then Conor just made the the position his own. Gibbs never really got back in the side, and to be honest, Conor never really looked back after that. If you put stuff out on X about him, asking Albion fans their opinions, you will get an extremely mixed response. I get on my pod get accused of being the chairman of the Conor Townsend fan club. It's not. I understand why people do that. It's because I have spent so much time sticking up for him, but it's because I have to stick up for him so much because he gets so much stick. But it's because he's not particularly dynamic. He doesn't race down that side. He doesn't go past people. He's not a tricky winger. He's certainly not going to push the ball and beat people with pace. But he's a very, very good passer of the ball. He is quite good at late arriving into the box. There was a period, not last season, the season before, where I think he won us 3 or 4 penalties in the season, and they were generally just from coming into the box, taking the ball off the winger and getting that toe on it past the defender and drawing the challenge and going down. He scored a wonderful free kick against your near neighbours Norwich towards the end of not last season, the season before. And I think he's a really solid one-on-one defender. He's got. I am surprised you've done this deal, I'll be honest, because whether it was fatigue last season or what it was, because he did play a lot of minutes last season. He made 33 starts. He played 34.7 90s, which is quite a lot for a player 31 years old. There was an obvious decline in his performances towards the end of last season. He had a bit of a horrible moment at Leicester where he went for a challenge that wasn't there, and Fatawu dinked past him. He had one again. He went for a challenge that wasn't there to be won at Stoke, and he's just started making mistakes towards the end of last season that I hadn't seen him make in the whole of his Albion career, other than that sort of seminal period that he had at the start.
He just needs a decent coach then, doesn't he?
Yeah. We'll see.
I'm only joking. I think you'll manage to tell
cool one's
to
good,
be honest.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I genuinely don't know whether with less football you will get the best out of him week in, week out. Because when you get the best out of Conor Townsend, he is Mr. 7 out of 10. He's the guy that you very rarely get 8s and 9s out of, but he's very rarely the guy you get 5s and 6s out of.
Yeah.
But the worry for me at the end of last season with him as our first choice left back was that we were starting to see those 5s and 6s, maybe 3 games out of every 5. And I just thought there's a decline here. And I don't know whether it's because he's tired and he's played too much football, or whether he's 31 and he's just, this is what we're seeing is the back end of a player's career. I do think maybe being a number 2 to Leif Davis at this stage of his career could well be the best thing for him, because I think what you might see when he has to play is those 7 out of 10 performances.
I mean, we've been saying on the show, haven't we, Rich, that, we haven't really got a lot of Premier League experience in Ipswich Town at the moment. It's certainly, I mean, Ben Johnson brings something like 60 appearances, but I mean, they've been intermittent, haven't they? Over 4 or 5 seasons. Whereupon, at least with Conor Townsend, he also brings that experience, right? Even if it's just sitting on the bench for the time being. But I mean, look, Chris is thinking that maybe he will feature in games in where we need to have more of a functional left back.
I think he's been brought as a backup, but I do think there'll be games when he features. And I think I said that I could see us, if we go into the end of the window, I could comfortably see us starting with Davis on the left wing if we haven't got a left winger, and having Townsend behind him, because if anything, that just makes you even more solid defensively, but gives you an out ball as well.
Yeah.
But I think there will be games when we need that. Away at Man City, those kind of games,
yeah.
easily could see that.
Well, I mean, we know what the threat Leaf brings, don't we? I mean, his crossing's been fantastic. He's the assist king, wasn't he? He led the assists in the Championship last season. Chris, yeah, I mean, look, we've left-sided has been a kind of theme for us for McKenna's recruitment this summer. Obviously, we brought Jacob Greaves in. He's going to be left-sided centre half. Do you think he's a good signing for us, and obviously someone that will team up with Conor Townsend on that left side of our defence, in theory?
Yeah, I really like him. I think he's a really, really good Championship defender. I mean, look, I think it's worth noting as well at the moment that there's something of a premium on left-sided defenders as well. You've just seen Arsenal pay a fortune for Calafiori. You've seen. You've seen Man United making an absolute scramble for Jared Branthwaite, and I think people want that left-sided player on the left-hand side of their defence, and they're not. There's not an abundance of them. So to be able to get Jacob Greaves in, who is left-footed, but not only that, I mean, his ball playing statistics are absolutely phenomenal. The way he passes the ball. He's really, really good in the air. I mean, I said a couple of seasons ago we played against Hull in a game when I think I saw him when he was 21, and we beat them at our place. But I was just like, I'd take Jacob Greaves all day long. I think to get him at the age he is, he's only 23. I think you've not only got a heck of a player, but it kind of doesn't matter whether you stay up or go down. His value will increase, because if he shows up well in the Premier League, you've suddenly got a very, very rare commodity, and that is a left-sided centre half who has proven that he can handle the division. If he does well this season, double your money at some point in the very, very near future, because he's a left-sided centre-back, and there's such a huge difference between spending all that money on a left-sided centre-back and spending it on a right-sided centre-back, because to increase in value as a right-sided centre-back, I'm sorry, but you're two a penny. There's so many of you. But to increase in value as a left-sided centre-back, all you've got to do is show up reasonably well. As much as I like Jared Branthwaite, what has he actually done up to this point to warrant the values being put on him? Even Calafiori has only had really one mega season at Bologna, and he's suddenly worth all this. If Jacob Greaves shows up well this season, you've potentially got a player that the top six are looking at for 50 million quid. That's the reality of the situation.
I think that's our left side. I think you look at the signings we made, Davis at 1.5 million or whatever, and he's also already worth God knows how much more than that. He has a good half a dozen games in the Premier League. He possibly gets in the England squad. Greaves is the same. And I know we've spent more on Greaves, but they've both got massive ceilings if they have a decent start to the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the other thing is as well, you always got. I know I'm talking about selling a player that you've just bought, but you kind of have to think about it in those terms, because no disrespect to you, but clubs like you are going to progress by taking a £20 million talent and turning them into a £50 million talent and selling them and then reinvesting that money. Yeah, exactly, like Brighton, like Brentford have done in the past. That's where you are, because the top six have just got so much more money than the rest of us. And the reality of it is, if you want to turn Jacob Greaves into somebody who can be bought by a top six club, which is where the money's at, you need somebody who can play out from the back, and he absolutely can do that. So it's not like you've just bought a head it kick it type centre half, because this is always the argument when you look at somebody, for example, like maybe Lewis Dunk, who's not as comfortable on the ball, or maybe somebody like Craig Dawson, who showed for years and years he's good enough in the Premier League, but he's never going to get taken by an Arsenal, by a Manchester City, by a Chelsea, because he hasn't got the ball playing ability. Jacob Greaves shows up well, and Arsenal come sniffing, come knocking. Maybe even Manchester City come sniffing and knocking because they want that quota of English players. He's English, he's left-sided, and he can play the ball. Frankly, in terms of value, he needs 15 good games in the Premier League, and you've got a £50 million player.
Yeah, absolutely. Bald and Blues ask if I'm drinking Ribena or red wine. Mate, this is Talking Town. This is red wine. This is the kind of stress we're under here. It's red wine all the way through. Chris, you were saying to me, the fee they've announced, well, they've said the fee's undisclosed, but we're thinking it's about 500 grand. You think that's too cheap for Townsend? You think it's more than that, don't you?
I don't know. I mean, look, he's 31 and he's in his last in the last year of his deal. I'm not the fees, because we've sold 3 players this week: Okay Koslu, Brandon Thomas Asante, and Conor Townsend, and all of the fees have been hotly disputed in the press between what I assume Albion are briefing into journalists versus what the buying club is briefing into journalists.
Yeah.
The way I explain, the way I make sense of that, because I've got no inside knowledge as to what the fees are. I think the only people who know what the fees are people who actually have pen to paper on the deals. So the way I make sense of that is that I assume that what Albion are telling to journalists is what the fee potentially could be, i.e. what it could be in terms of add-ons. For example, we will not sell you Conor Townsend and not put a number in there for if you stay up this season that you have to pay us. That we will get it for Conor Townsend if he plays 30 Premier League games for you, etc., etc. So I imagine, I've heard that the down payment is slightly more. I heard it was about 750k, and that's what John Percy reported the other day. But then I've also heard the figure 1.5 million kicked around. Now, what I'm assuming is that the 750 down, and then probably 750 in performance-related add-ons, which is, again, why we're having this debate about whether Brandon Thomas Asante has gone to Coventry for 2, 3 or 4 million. The reality is we're probably getting 2 million up front, but there's probably 2 million in potential add-ons. How much of that will we see? Probably about 1.25, because you never get all these add-ons, because some of them are stupid. There will be some mad number in there for if you get into Europe or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's stuff in there that we won't see. But yeah, I imagine the down payment is somewhere 500 grand to 750, and I imagine there's probably about another 750k in performance related add-ons in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Conor did his medical yesterday, we believe, and then he's travelled out to Germany, Rich, because we've got Borussia Mönchengladbach tomorrow, and then we play Hoffenheim Saturday. So obviously 2 different 11s there. Chance for him to get some minutes under his belt. A chance for Amari Hutchinson to finally get some minutes under his belt, Rich. We've not seen him yet, have we, in the 2 games we've had so far?
No, and from all accounts and rumours and stuff, it seems like our club weren't particularly happy with the plan that he'd got given by Chelsea before we signed him. And if that's the case, it just shows why some of these younger players potentially get burnt out by clubs, Premier League clubs, or don't ever really fulfill their potential. Because I think he is clearly a very talented player and was very fit last season, but he played 50 games.
yeah. Of course, all competitions.
He's 20 years old.
Yeah.
I think it'll be great that he gets some minutes. But people thinking that he's going to come in and set the world alight when it's his first season in the top flight need to also just cut him some slack if he doesn't have a good game every now and again.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it? This is always the issue, isn't it, Chris? Fan entitlement. We get it at Pullman Road. You must get it at the Hawthorns, right? Everyone wants everyone to be robots.
What I would say to that is, and I completely agree with what you've said there, patience is the key, because we went through this with Grady D and Garner. Absolutely unbelievable for us on loan in the promotion season. Signed him for a lot of money in the summer, and he just didn't. It didn't quite drop for him at first. He scored a great goal away at Everton, but kind of struggled his way through the Premier League season in a very poor team. And I do think you'll be a better team than we were that season, because that was one of the most disappointing West Bromwich Albion teams I've seen in the Premier League era. Was that team that played the COVID season in the top flight? We were cannon fodder really from day one. But it kind of just it coloured a lot of people's opinion of Grady going forward, and he's only just now really recovering in people's sort of hearts and minds his reputation, to be honest with you. And I think the expectation is so massive because a young player can come on loan to the Championship, play with total freedom, absolutely no fear, express themselves. They're probably going to be a level above everybody else. And then they go permanently. Suddenly at 21 or whatever, they've got this huge price tag on their shoulders. There's suddenly this expectation because you come on loan and Amari's first senior loan, nobody's expecting anything of him. Grady, same, first senior loan, nobody's expecting anything of him. He just goes out on that pitch, expresses himself, takes the Michael, has a wonderful, wonderful time week in, week out. But suddenly, if you're the guy that we've just spent, in his case, 16 million quid for, and you're in the Premier League, you're the guy that's got to keep us up. And it's a totally different sort of pressure. And Amari's, I don't know what kind of a character Amari is. It was always going to be more difficult on Grady because he's a very quiet, withdrawn kind of guy who doesn't particularly like the limelight. He's actually a fascinating guy. He paints and makes music in his own time. He doesn't like go out or anything. Nice. He's quite introverted. Yeah. But also quite sort of like very artistically talented and stuff. But he's like one of these sort of savant types, you know what I mean? But he's not. He doesn't court any of that attention. Maybe Amari's different. Maybe Amari will absolutely love all the spotlights being on him, but he's going to have to deal with the fact that on day one, when you're on the TV and Sky or TNT, I don't know who's showing your game. TNT is doing the build-up. There will be a camera shoved in Amari Hutchinson's face, putting all his stats up from last season. This is the guy. This is the guy Ipswich have spent all this money on. This is the guy that's got to keep them up. And he's got to deal with that. And it takes a certain personality to be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I was going to say, I don't think he strikes me as someone who's going to have an issue with that, given the fact that his first ever senior goal was away at Southampton and he goes and does a backflip as his celebration. And then does it on Sky and things. I don't think he's fussed, but my point still stands that he's young, so people need to give him some slack, but they also need to give every player some slack. We're not going to see. And
he hasn't had to deal with having a bad game or a bad run of form yet, and that's the other thing. It's like how you bounce back from that, how you bounce back from getting bullied by a fullback, and how you bounce back from being called rubbish in the papers and by Sky pundits. That's something he hasn't had thrown at him yet. He's had it all his own way up to this point. I'm not saying he can't, but I'm saying it's a different sort of pressure.
Yeah, and of course we've thrown some serious money at him as well, haven't we, Rich? He's broken our transfer record like 5 times over.
Yeah, but it was going to take that this season anyway. You look at the money. You look at the money we spent, and I think people laughed when I was saying that we were going to break our transfer record last summer. But it was only a matter of time before we were going to go way past our
mil, yeah, 4.5 mil.
When you consider that we'd sold players for 8 million.
Yes,
multiple times. It just showed how badly our club was run in that period, that we'd never spent more than 4.5 million even though we sold multiple players for 8 million.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just going back to Townsend, Chris, as we sort of wind down a little bit now. I mean, are West Brom fans a bit gutted that he's going? I mean, he had a good season with you last season. I know he played in both games against Ipswich at the Hawthorns and Portman Road. I mean, was this someone you were kind of thinking that was going to be sort of nailed on for left back going into your new Championship campaign?
Well, yeah, but I think people expected him to be our left back, but I think that's partly because we didn't expect anybody to come in and pay any money for him because he was 31 with a year left. I don't think there's a lot of Albion fans out there who are gutted about it. I'll be perfectly honest. Even myself, as one of his big fans, I'm not particularly gutted about it because he was one of our better earners at the club. We've got him off the wage bill. We've got a bit of money for him instead of losing him for nothing next summer.
Yeah.
And it gives. And I had always said, I said at the start of this summer that one of the things we've got to do is have this summer is have a long-term plan for a long-term succession plan for Conor Townsend. Well, it's fine. It just makes that more pertinent. It's not a major problem. So I don't think anybody's losing their head about it. That where a few Albion fans are losing their head this week is the fact that we've lost 3 players. We've brought one in on a 29-year-old on a free transfer from League One, and what they're seeing is the opening day of the season 9 days away, and our squad is in no fit state to start a season. But I'm sorry, that's just the stupidity of the people who run football that they close a transfer window on August the 30th when the Championship have already played 3 games and a League Cup game by then. And frankly, they might as well write those 3 games off because I remember Leeds going into those games playing us in the second game of the season last season and having next to none of Somerville didn't play because he was meant to be going. Nonto didn't play because he was meant to be going. Leeds looked completely different in that game against us to the way they did for most of the rest of the season. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And the only teams it benefits are the most wealthy teams. It doesn't really benefit any Championship team, to be honest, in the larger sense, because even the ones at the top of the Championship, like we had with Leeds last season, are thinking at that point maybe we're going to lose Nonto and Somerville, so we can't play them because their heads are all over the show. The only people the season starting when it does benefit are Manchester City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, and everybody else suffers because everybody else is still building their squad at that point. Nobody else has had the money to go and do their business early and just bully their way through the market. The only clubs who've been able to do that are the clubs where paying £50 million for somebody is nothing, and it's got to change because I'm genuinely worried about the opening 3 games of the season. I think we've got QPR away, Leeds at home, and then Stoke away. And I could honestly see us losing all 3, to be honest with you, because we're not in any fit state to start the season. I honestly think we'll get to August the 30th, and I think we will have a good, strong squad. But I think it's wrong that other teams get a 3-game head start on other teams just because they've got the wealth to do their business early. The transfer window should close before the first game of the season. It should.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Well, it's interesting you say that about Leeds, Rich, because we remember that Nonto's first game back was against us, wasn't it?
Wasn't that the only game they played all season with? Excuse my kids in the background.
Right,
wasn't that the only game all season that they played with that front 4?
Yeah, it was so like that because who was the lad who scored against us and he buggered off to Bournemouth, didn't he? Right after. What was that, guys? Yeah,
they had Perot, Somerville,
Nonto,
and someone else, and I can't remember who.
See a Central something? It was something like that.
But that was Sinistera. It was his only game for them.
Yeah. It was because
he was
crazy.
Basically on strike until then.
Absolutely.
But that is, you're completely right. It's a completely farcical system that they can be playing games before the season's finished, without the transfer window being finished. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, guys, we're going to wind down a little bit. Look, we thought, Rich, this evening might be a Sammy Smodics reveal. It hasn't happened yet. Do we still think this is going to go on? I mean, look, we've seen it with, like we were chatting, weren't we, Chris? Was Jayden Philogene going to come from Hull to Town? In the end, he goes back to Villa. Is Smodics going to happen, Rich? What's your gut feel on this one?
I think it is. I think Blackburn have tried their best to do everything they can to block it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, player power wins
Yeah.
in football these days.
He's
And
always been a player we've looked at now. I mean, look, he's from Colchester. I think he's still got family living locally. With the rumours are he wants to come to Ipswich. They've had showdown talks at Blackburn, but they're a bit of a funny run club, aren't they, with the Venkis and all that?
yeah, they're a really weirdly run club, and they're losing players left, right, and centre. So they're probably trying to persuade him that they will invest and that they will go again. But he needs to cash in on his best ever season and a chance to move back here with his little kid and his wife and be close to his parents and his brother and everyone else and finish his career in the Premier League is probably what he's thinking, because he's not the youngest either. Will we? It depends on how much we pay. I think it's a good signing. If the money
10 mil? You're saying 10 mil, right?
the money that's being suggested, I think that's a good signing, because I think it's relatively low risk to spend, bonkers as it is, to spend 10 million.
Yeah,
is pretty much low risk when you're a Premier League club, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What are you thinking, Chris? I mean, look, Smodix, 27 goals out of nowhere. A bit like when Dale Murphy was at Ipswich, suddenly gets 27 goals himself that one season, then goes on to Newcastle and just went back to normal, really. I mean, what are you thinking? Do you think Smodix can step up to the Premier League? You've seen him quite a lot in the Championship, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, he probably, I mean, certainly can. To be honest, I've been impressed with Sammy Smodix for longer than just last season, because I think his energy is fantastic. Obviously, last season was a watershed moment in terms of goals. I do slightly disagree with Rich, though, that there's no risk to it, because if you come down with him, it can be difficult, because obviously PSR spreads that cost across a number of years. You put someone like Sammy Smodix on a 3-year deal, and he is what, 28 now. He's going to be 32, actually, would be at the end of a 3-year deal. There's not going to be any resale value in him, so that anything you spend on him is all going to be loss. I personally think. I think he could be a quality player for you, and I think finding that player from midfield that can score you goals in the Premier League is huge. I do think there's a bit of risk there. I do think it's a lot of money for a 28-year-old who has never before had a season like he had last season in the Championship. You know, his other Championship seasons are 5 goals, 6 goals, no goals. You know, he's only ever scored decent numbers in League One outside of that, and he is 28. So it's not like this is a 23-year-old who's suddenly coming to the bloom. But I do think he could bring something. He'd bring some dynamism. He'd bring a threat. And I think if you stay up, then Rich is absolutely right. There's no risk, because
if you go down though, you look at making money on Greaves, Davis, 2 or 3 others that way more than balance the books.
Of course you do, and
they'll think of that.
Yeah, you sell elsewhere, of course you do, and you're absolutely right. I think look, you sign Sammy Smodix in the hope that he's the difference maker for you. The problem is you don't sign Sammy Smodix to be any sort of a squad player, because you don't pay £10 million for a 28-year-old squad player from the Championship. That would be ludicrous. If you're signing him, it's because you believe he will get you the goals from attacking midfield that will be the difference between you staying up and going down. If he doesn't do that, he's been a failure. If he does it, he's been a success. It really is as black and white as that for me. Whereas there's other players that you could sign that, you know, like, for example, even if Jacob Greaves has a difficult season next season and you go down, he could then still come good for you in the long run. I think Sammy Smodix, it's real. It's sink or swim, and either does the business and you stay up and it's fantastic, or he doesn't and you go down and it's a little bit disappointing. It's that simple for me.
Where would you play Smolix if he comes in then, Rich? I mean, he's a number 10, isn't he? But we've got Amari vying for that role. Got Conor Chaplin vying for that role. I mean, where would you play him, Rich?
I don't know, to be honest. I think because you've got to also think that it's going to be the bench. It's going to be the bench side of things as well. So you have Conor Chaplin coming off the bench, or you have Smodix coming off the bench, or I think the dynamism that Smodix gives is quite big. And I'm not expecting him to come in and score 10 goals. I don't think. I think this is a one-off season that he's just had because he's never done it before.
But peaking in his career, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, and he did it. He did it playing centre forward as well, because obviously Brereton Diaz went and he had to lead the line. And realistically speaking, he's not going to do that for you guys.
No, exactly. And that's Sam Gallagher, who also we tried to get in the January window, ended up getting Kiefer Moore. He was out injured as well. I mean, it's interesting, Rich, isn't it? As I'll say, we're going to wind down in a second, guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. You know, we always talk about the player trading model, don't we? And you're seeing that with Leif Davis, as you said at the top of the show. You buy him for 1.5, he probably goes for 30 million. As Chris said earlier, get 15 good games out of Jacob Greaves. He's going to double his money, if not more, if he was to be sold. Yet here we are with Conor Townsend and Smodix coming in, who are kind of like, I wouldn't say, well, I mean, maybe Townsend, Chris, is twilight of his career, but certainly, Rich, you know, there's a few more years under Smodix's belt, but you're not going to recoup 10 mil, are you?
No, but you've also got to bring some experience in. So they've kind of balanced that. But also, Ben Johnson, they brought in for nothing, and he's definitely worth a fee.
Agreed.
So I think it's kind of, you look at Ashton and how he runs clubs, and he nicked Webster off of us for peanuts, and then a season later sold him to Brighton.
Yeah.
And made a fortune. And I trust him to make the right judgment calls and to make sure we're balancing the books with PSR. And we're not done yet. There'll be more brought in, which is blatantly obvious from McKenna's post-match comments at the weekend.
Need more bodies, he said, didn't he? Yeah, absolutely.
He knows it's a long, hard season in the Premier League, and he needs horses for courses. He needs different players for different formations, different players for different styles. Well, not necessarily formations, but passage of play in the game.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you kind of said that to me on the phone yesterday, Chris, when we were chatting. I mean, there is a chance McKenna football could be like Bielsa, right? I mean, you're winning some games 3-0 against decent opposition, then you go in Old Trafford and getting done for 6, right, Chris? I mean, that could happen for Ipswich, right? That is our style.
It is. I don't think you can be as open. I think if you play this coming season the way you did last season, it's more likely to end like it did for Burnley under Company than it is Leeds under Bielsa.
They bought badly, though, didn't they? Burnley bought badly last season.
Yeah, and they did. But the big thing for me, to be honest, was I think if he just tightened up at the back a little bit, I think they'd have got quite a few more points. So
yeah, but he also brought in a keeper and then dropped the keeper.
Yeah, who we've now got.
There. And apparently, according to Burnley fans, Muric, if he'd have played more games, they'd have stayed up because he was so good.
10 games, I think, when he was in.
No, I agree with that, but at the same time, it was also, he was so wedded to playing out from the back and doing certain things, and also, I mean, I remember vividly a game away at Tottenham where they went ahead and he just carried on doing the same things, and it's like, shut up shop, man. I mean, look, say what you like about Bielsa and his attacking football, but he also knew how to defend in a game. The guy was a tactical genius. It wasn't one style all the way through. I think Company was very naive. I really do. But and I think, as I say, I think if McKenna goes in and plays every week the same way you did in the Championship. To be honest, look, I watched a lot of you last season in the Championship, and we did a number on you because we worked out how to shut you down, and beyond that, you couldn't defend what we had at the other end. Now, if you think we can defend like that against you, wait till you see the majority of teams in the Championship, because they're like us on steroids. So I think you've got to have a plan. You've got to have an alternative plan to deal with it. I hate the term plan B, because I think you actually in football you need a plan B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through the alphabet. But I think you need to, and you need to be adaptable in game as well. And I think that's where Company got it massively wrong last season with Burnley. I don't think he wouldn't even adapt in game. I think McKenna is one of the brightest young coaches around, and I don't think you are that if you only have one style of playing. I think he kept doing the things he was doing at your place because they were working. But I do think also he will have learnt lessons from something like Cardiff away, where he goes 1-0 up and he doesn't stop playing the way he's playing, and he gets done twice. And you lose the game 2-1. And I think he's a clever enough coach to look at a game like that and go, we cannot do that in the Premier League. We have to have a shut up shop option. I honestly believe he will do, because I think if he doesn't, it's suicide.
I think it's also things like the whole game right at the end of the season. We're 3-2 up with not many minutes to go, and we go and blow it. And that happened a few times, and I think he's learning each time because he's only a young coach. But that's Hudson's been brought in for a reason. That's another factor of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, brilliant show. Done over an hour. Chris, we might not see you. Well, I'll see you obviously, but we might not see you on the show until post Liverpool. I mean, what are you thinking about this? Do you think we can finish outside the bottom three? What are you thinking? Gut feeling.
I think you definitely can. Look, if you do anything other than scrap for survival as a promoted club, I will be surprised, because it's just such a ridiculously difficult step up. But also, I look at that division at the moment, and I see Leicester potentially starting on a points deduction. I'm not overly impressed with Southampton, and I have to say, when we talk about naive coaches, I think Russell Martin will be so arrogant that he thinks he can go into that division and dictate the way he plays football, and I think he could get done like Vincent Kompany did. So, I mean, there's two teams that I think will finish below you. You've only got to find one more. I think Wolves are going to financially have another difficult season. I think they're massively trying to right the ship. So there could be difficulties there. You've only got to have one club get it really, really wrong. It could be, it could be Forest. You never know. It could be somebody else. Brentford got a little bit too close for comfort last season. Yeah. I think when I look at the three promoted clubs, I think my prediction for Ipswich is you will finish top of those three promoted clubs. Your season hinges on whether you can finish above somebody else. Well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of that school of thought as well. I mean, you talk about Russell Martin and Southampton. They let in a shed load of goals last season, didn't they? You only have to look at Sheffield United in the Championship. Then letting that many, done over 100 goals, Chris, last season. The other end.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I mean. I don't think they'll stay up, and I don't think Leicester will stay up. You're the one I give a chance to.
Okay, let's leave it on that positive. All right, brilliant to have you on board, Chris, for the season. We're looking forward to it. Rich, great to have you back on the show again. We'll see you very soon, of course. Hopefully, we'll see you all again very soon for a Sammy Smodick's real show. Let's see what happens. But all the best. Enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
Good luck with your wedding, Chris.
Crazy from just the thought of you.